5 ads, one night, one player, and buried inside one of them, an announcement that just changed everything about Caitlin Clark's future in this league. Most people watched those commercials and saw a basketball star selling insurance and sports drinks. But if you actually listened, if you caught what she said between the highlight reels and the taglines, you heard something that brands don't accidentally put in a national ad campaign. You heard a decision, a permanent one. Here's what nobody's talking about yet. On WNBA Opening Night 2026, 5 separate companies, State Farm, Gatorade, Eli Lilly, Amazon Web Services, and Nike, all dropped brand new commercials featuring Caitlin Clark within the same 36-hour window. That's not a coincidence. That's not even a PR strategy. That's a coordinated signal from the biggest money in American sports telling you exactly where they think this is going. Because brands don't place bets like that on moments. They place bets like that on decades. And the announcement Clark made, the one hiding in plain sight inside one of those ads, tells you exactly why every single one of them is willing to go all in right now. But to understand why it matters, you have to understand where she was just 12 months ago. The 2025 WNBA season was supposed to answer the question everyone was still quietly asking. Was Caitlin Clark a phenomenon, or was she a product of college basketball hype that would fade the second the competition got real? Her rookie year numbers were electric, but skeptics pointed to a fever team still finding its identity. The real test was year 2. What happened instead broke every model anyone had built for women's basketball growth. Indiana Fever games became events, not just sellouts. Events. Cities that had never treated a WNBA road game like a concert started treating Fever road games exactly like that. The rivalry with Angel Reese and the Chicago Sky didn't just drive highlights. It drove appointment television. Aya Wilson, already the best player in the league, suddenly had a foil that made every Las Vegas Aces matchup feel like a championship preview. Sabrina Ionescu and the New York Liberty, a team built to compete for a title, found themselves on the wrong side of a viewership war they hadn't planned for. The numbers don't lie. WNBA viewership records that had stood for years got broken, then broken again, then broken a third time before the All-Star break. And every brand watching those ratings, every media buyer who had been cautiously dipping a toe into women's basketball, suddenly realized they had been asleep at the wheel by the time the 2025 playoffs ended. The bidding war for Caitlin Clark's next endorsement cycle wasn't a bidding war anymore. It was a stampede. State Farm renewed, Gatorade expanded, Eli Lilly, an Indianapolis institution, same city as a Fever, leaned into the partnership harder than anyone expected. Amazon Web Services, a brand that doesn't spend money on athletes unless the data absolutely justifies it, came in with a campaign that ran during prime time. And Nike, who had been notably quiet through her first 2 seasons, finally moved, all of them dropping on the same night. All of them built around the same story. And then in one of those ads, Caitlin Clark said something that no one in her camp had publicly confirmed before. 7 words. 7 words that answered the question every Fever fan, every WNBA sponsor, and every league executive has been holding their breath about since the moment her college eligibility ran out. She's not leaving. But that's not even the biggest part of the announcement. What she said next, and what it means for the entire future of the WNBA. That's where the story actually starts. 7 words. And the moment she said them, every contract negotiation, every trade rumor, will she go overseas in the off-season headline, all of it became irrelevant overnight. Here's what she said, buried inside the Amazon Web Services campaign, delivered quietly, almost like she wasn't even trying to make a moment. This is where I'm building something. This is home. Now, on the surface, that sounds like a line a marketing team wrote for her. Something warm, something safe, something that sells cloud computing to mid-sized businesses. Except it wasn't written for her. According to people close to production, Clark pushed to include that line herself. It wasn't in the original script. She added it, and every brand in that 36-hour ad blitz knew exactly what she meant when she said it, because they had already seen what came of the announcement behind closed doors weeks before opening night. Caitlin Clark has committed to a long-term future in Indiana, not just another season, not a wait and see. A structured, multi-year personal investment in the city, the franchise, and the league itself, anchored by a business portfolio that goes well beyond endorsement checks. She's not just playing Indiana. She's betting on it. And that changes the calculation for every single team in this league. Because here's what people outside the WNBA world still don't fully understand. The Caitlin Clark effect was never just about one player's statistics. It was about what happens to a franchise, to a city, when a transcendent talent decides to plant a flag. When Diana Taurasi did it in Phoenix, the Mercury became a destination. When Breanna Stewart arrived in New York, the Liberty went from a struggling franchise to a championship contender with a sold-out arena and a primetime broadcast deal. When Nafisa Collier built something real in Minnesota, the Lynx stopped being an afterthought and started being a blueprint. Clark staying in Indiana long-term triggers the same chain reaction, except the scale is different, because the viewership numbers she's driving aren't franchise-level numbers. They're league-level numbers. The 2025 WNBA Finals drew ratings that networks had stopped expecting from women's professional basketball. Advertisers who've been buying 30-second spots at one price point came back for the next cycle and found the price had moved significantly. League revenue projections that had been built on cautious, conservative assumptions got thrown out and rebuilt from scratch. And the primary engine behind all of it was a 24-year-old from Des Moines who learned her three-point shot on a slanted driveway in Iowa. But here's where the story gets complicated, because not everyone in the WNBA is celebrating this announcement. There's a conversation happening inside this league right now, a real one, not the polished version you see in press conferences, about what it means when one player generates this much economic gravity. Aya Wilson, the reigning MVP, has spent her entire career being the most dominant player in women's basketball. She's done it with less coverage, less endorsement money, and less of the mainstream cultural moment that Clark walked into almost immediately. And Wilson has not been quiet about it. Neither has Angel Reese, whose rivalry with Clark drove some of the biggest viewership spikes of the entire 2025 season, and who has publicly, pointedly asked whether her contributions to that growth are being valued the same way. The announcement Clark made on opening night isn't just about one player's future. It just forced every conversation the WNBA has been avoiding about money, about visibility, about who gets credit for building something back into the center of the room. And one of those players just fired back in a way that nobody expected. What happened next didn't make the highlight reels. It didn't trend on X for 48 hours. But inside the WNBA, inside the locker rooms of front offices, the boardrooms where league decisions actually get made, it landed like a thunderclap. 24 hours after Clark's 5 ads dominated opening night, Aya Wilson walked into a press conference and did something she had never done before in her professional career. She stopped being diplomatic. Wilson, 3-time WNBA MVP, 2-time champion, the most decorated player of her generation, looked directly into the cameras and said something that every player in that league had been thinking for 2 years, but nobody with her platform had been willing to say out loud. She talked about legacy, about who builds a league and who gets credited for building it, about the players who filled arenas before the cameras arrived, who fought for equal pay, who used their platforms for social justice when that cost them sponsorships instead of earning them, and about what it means when the financial revolution finally arrives and the math doesn't distribute equally. She wasn't attacking Caitlin Clark. Read that again, because the internet will try to tell you otherwise. Wilson was attacking a system, a media infrastructure that took 20 years to pay serious attention to women's basketball, and then, the moment it did, funneled the majority of that attention through a single lens. She was making an argument that the rising tide, the record ratings, the expanded broadcast deals, the 5-ad opening night, needed to lift every boat, not just the one the cameras were already pointed at. And the response from around the league was immediate. Breanna Stewart posted. Nafisa Collier spoke in her own press availability. Sabrina Ionescu, quietly, in the way Ionescu always does things, gave an interview where she made the same point Wilson made, except wrapped in enough diplomatic language that only people paying close attention caught it. Angel Reese, who catches criticism every time she opens her mouth about this subject, said nothing publicly this time. Her silence said everything. And then Caitlin Clark did something that nobody in the media ecosystem had prepared a script for. She agreed with them, not in a carefully worded statement released through her PR team at 11 p.m. on a Friday, not in a vague social media post designed to be interpreted 17 different ways. In a direct, on-camera response during her own opening night press availability, Clark acknowledged what Wilson said, validated the broader conversation, and this is the part that got quietly buried under the ad cycle noise, calling on the league's broadcast partners and sponsors by name to expand their investment beyond the players who are already visible. She named Aya Wilson specifically. She named Angel Reese. And just like that, the narrative that the media had spent 2 years building, Clark versus the rest of the WNBA, the new star against the established order, collapsed under the weight of what actually happened on opening night. Because the real announcement was never about one player's commitment to one franchise. The real announcement was that the WNBA, the actual league, the actual players, the women who built this thing brick by brick before anyone was watching, had reached a moment where they could finally demand to be seen on their own terms, where the money was real enough, and the audience was large enough, and the cultural moment was loud enough that they didn't have to choose between visibility and dignity anymore. 5 ads on opening night wasn't a Caitlin Clark story. It was a WNBA story. Finally, and the players who lived through every empty arena, every budget flight, every season where the cameras weren't rolling, they made sure the world knew it. The game has changed. The money has changed. The audience has changed. And this time, for the first time in the history of this league, nobody is letting anyone forget who did the changing.